Class, and today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations by factoring. And how we do that is we want to apply that zero product property. So before I go into that, let's just explore something a little bit. So what of these statements makes this true? Okay, well let's go ahead and explore it. What times 16 is 0? Okay, well anything times 0 is 0, so we're going to go ahead and fill in 0 there. Negative 69 times what is 0? Well, again, 0. 17 times 89 times what? Times negative 123 is 0. Again, that is 0. So your zero product property states that any number times 0 is 0, which I'm sure you guys have heard many times, many years ago, but now we just have a formal name to it. So that's that zero product property. So let's solve using the zero product property. So again, what we're doing is we're saying something times 0 has to equal 0. Okay, well, think about this. I need either this to be 0 or this to be 0. Well, how can I make that 0? Well, we got to know what that value could be to make that parenthesis 0. So how you're going to do that then is you're going to set each parenthesis equal to 0. So I have x plus 3 equals 0 and x plus 2 equals 0. Okay, so then let's solve. So to solve for this, we're going to subtract 3. X is equal to negative 3. Okay, same thing over here. We're going to subtract 2. X is equal to negative 2. Okay, let's check our work with that. So if x is negative 3, let's go ahead and plug that into this equation. So I have negative 3 plus 3 times negative 3 plus 2. Does that equal 0? Well, negative 3 times 3, that gives me 0. Negative 3 plus 2 is negative 1. 0 times negative 1, well, we know 0 times anything is 0, so that gives me 0. That goes ahead and checks out. And we can check the other one if you would like. So negative 2 plus 3 times negative 2 plus 2, does that give me 0? Well, we have 1 times 0, which is 0. So again, that checks out. Okay, so that's why we go ahead and solve that, because we want one of those parentheses to be 0 to solve. And what we're going to do is in that next module, I'm going to go into a lot more what these zeros mean, because it's actually our solution to that quadratic. So it's where the parabola, which is a graph for a quadratic, crosses that x-axis. But we'll get into that a little bit more next week. Okay, so now again, we're just going to practice this. So I want to know what makes it 0. So again, whatever is in parentheses, you just set equal to 0. And then you solve using what we learned in week 1. And sometimes it's just a little bit more complicated. So x is 7 or x is 7/2. Or if you wanted to, you could put it as 3.5. Either way, both are correct there. Okay, now let's look at this next one. Now this next one is good because it doesn't appear right away that we have 2 parentheses. Okay, but in fact we do, because we have a term here and we have a term here. So we got to set them both equal to 0. Now this one's nice. It's just saying 8 times what is 0. So some of you might just go right away and put x is 0. But if you want to follow the steps we learned in week 1, so that means multiplication, the reverse is distribution. Again, 0 divided by 8 is 0. Okay? Solving here. So you'll see a lot of 1 or 2 step equations with this one. And x is 2/3. Typically with when solving for quadratics, you will have 2 answers, okay? Because just giving a little glimpse into next week, here is an example of a parabola facing up. It crosses the x-axis 2 times, which means it has 2 solutions. So that's why you typically get, you're going to have 2 solutions. The only times it doesn't, just showing you, is it could just touch once like this, which means when you're solving, you're going to get only one solution. but that's a lot of times if you see something like this. Okay, again, we're going to go a little bit more detail into that next week, but just making you aware that a lot of times you're going to have those two answers with these. Okay, so now let's combine what we've learned so far in this module, okay, with factoring and now solving for it. So in order to solve for this, I have to be able to, so some people try to guess that b value. Nope, not for me. Okay, you want to make sure you set this up by factoring. Okay, so again, we're going to look here. My c value is negative, so I'm going to go ahead and set this up, b plus, b minus. Okay, so remember I need factors of 18 that when I subtract give me 7. Okay, so again, I just kind of like listing them. We got 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. Okay, so let's go ahead and subtract. So 1 and 18, that's 17. That doesn't work. And then 2 and 9, well, if we subtract those, we're going to get our 7. Okay, so now remember with this one, because the signs are different, it does matter where the 2 and the 9 go. So now let's look at the sign. I need a negative 7. So is it 2 minus 9 or 9 minus 2? Well, that's going to give me 2 minus 9 is going to give me that negative value. So now we have it factored correctly. So now that we have it factored correctly, now I'm going to go ahead and solve for it. So this is what we just learned with that zero product property. I'm going to set each of those parentheses equal to 0 and solve. One thing you can notice with this is your answers, if it's just a one-step equation, it's b plus 2, your answer is negative 2. It's b minus 9, your answer is positive 9. Because remember, you're solving, you're moving it over, you're doing that inverse, so it's going to be that opposite sign. So that's a nice little way to look as well. Okay, so that is it. So again, we're going to combine our factoring, and then just we're doing one extra step with it, now setting it equal to 0 and solving. Okay. So again, we're going to go ahead and solve. I notice my c is positive and my b is positive, so that's that x plus, x plus. So factors of 6, well, that we just got 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So I need factors of 6 that when I add give me 5. Well, that's going to be that 2 and 3. Again, the signs are the same here, so if it doesn't matter if I go 2, 3 or 3, 2. Now that I have it factored, now I can go ahead and set them, use that zero product property, and set them each equal to 0. Okay, well again, we can just look and know it's opposite signs, but if you would like to solve, usually 0 minus 2 is negative 2. Again, if it's a plus, to move it over, you're subtracting. We get that negative 3. Again, with all of these, you can check your work. You can check your work here. You can also check your work here. Okay, I'll show you that one. So let's plug in negative 2. So I have negative 2 squared plus 5x plus 6. Does that equal 0? Well, negative 2 squared is 4. 4 plus, that gives me negative 10 plus 6. 4 minus 10 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. 0 equals 0. Okay, so that checks out. It will also check out with negative 3. So again, there's a lot of different ways to check your work here. And again, if you're watching this, a nice hint for your quiz is it's multiple choice. If you forget what to do, just plug your answers in and figure out which one works. Okay, so again, we're going to solve by factoring. Now the first one I'm going to do here is I'm, again, looking for that GCF. So I have a GCF of x here, so we're going to factor that out. So I have x, and then we have 2x squared plus 7x minus 15. Now remember, there was no numbers with that because 2, 7, 15. 2 is the smallest. 2 does not go into 7 or 15. So we do not have a GCF of a number, just the letter. Okay, so we have the GCF out. Now we got to factor this. Okay, so that's that AC method. So I'm going to take 2. Again, I don't look at the signs here because I already know that my C is negative. So I have it set up as x plus x minus. So 2 times 15 is 30. I need factors of 30 that when I subtract give me 7. Okay, so let's list our factors of 30. So I got 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10. And yes, I know we can stop here, but if some of you want to keep going, there is that 5 and 6. Okay, so again, now I need to look at my factors. I need to subtract them, and when I subtract them, I need to get that b value of 7. So that doesn't work, that doesn't work. And again, like we know, the 3 and 10 will work. So again, the signs are different. I need a positive 7. So is it 3 minus 10 or 10 minus 3? Well, it's 10 minus 3 to give me that 7. Now remember from that last video, because we multiplied by 2, we have to divide by 2. That's that bottoms up method. Okay, so now let's go ahead and simplify that. So that, remember, your GCF you just bring down. 10 divided by 2 is 5, so we have x plus 5. 3 divided by 2, now that doesn't give you a whole number, so this is where we bring the bottom up, and we have 2x minus 3. Okay, so now it's properly factored, and now I can set them each to 0. Now this one, if you notice, the highest degree is 3, so it's a cubic, so you should have 3 solutions. So I'm setting each part equal to 0. Well, luckily for us, this one is solved right away. Okay, for this one here, I'm going to subtract 5, so x is equal to negative 5. And this one's a 2-step. And x is equal to 3/2. Okay, again, you could kind of see it here, x minus 3/2. My answer is a positive 3/2. A nice way to check your answer. Okay, that was a little bit more complicated one. This f here is going to look very similar to your written assignment, except for instead of the x, I think it's just a number that you factor out. So, okay, so let's do another one. Okay, so now this one. Okay, so again, we have to solve by factoring. So this time it's not equal to 0. Well, the rule is if we're solving, it has to be equal to 0. Okay, no matter what, when you're solving, it has to be equal to 0 because we're trying to find those solutions, and your solutions are when x is equal to 0. So the first thing I need to do is I need to move this over so it's equal to 0. Now we'll go ahead and rewrite it. Okay, now let's look for a GCF. Well, one thing I'm noticing is 2, 14, 16. Those are all even numbers, so we know we're taking a 2 out, and then they all have that x, so we're taking the 2x out. So 2x cubed divided by 2x, that just gives me x squared. 14 divided by 2 is 7. I have 2 x's, I took 1 out, so you have 1 left. Negative 16 divided by 2 is negative 8. You have an x, you take out an x, so you have no x's left. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and factor this right here. So again, you bring your GCF down. My c is negative, so we're going to go ahead and set up those parentheses. And again, this is just the way I factor. I did post a couple different videos on different methods to factor. You choose whatever one you like the best. So again, I have factors of 8. So any factors of 8 that when I subtract give me 7. Well, I'm just going to stop here because that's 1 and 8. I need a positive 7. So that's going to be 8 minus 1. That gives me that positive 7. And now again, to solve, we set each part equal to 0. So divide by 2. X is equal to 0. Subtract 8. X is equal to negative 8. And add 1. X is equal to 1. Okay, so again, a little hint here, it was a cubic. You have 3 answers. Just to show you just really briefly, let's say I had something like this where we had to factor out, let's just do the same thing. So it was, let's say it was 2x squared plus 14x minus 16. So I just want to show you one little thing with it if you didn't have one extra x. So this is a separate problem because you'll see that. So again, I factored out the GCF. We already know what the answer is to factoring that, so I'm just going to go ahead and put that in. Now, here, if you notice, our GCF is just a number. Now, out of practice, you can still, if you want, set each part equal to 0. It might not be bad right away. So here you're going to get your answer. X is -8, X is +1. But here it says 2 equals 0. There's no X in it, so you can't solve for anything, so you can just cross that out. Okay, so if your GCF is just a number, out of habit, it's still good to set it equal to 0, just because a lot of people do forget if it's an X factored out to solve for that one and get that third one. But if it is just a number, then you don't have to worry about it. Again, look at your highest degree. That's squared. That means I should have 2 answers. The one we did on this problem, it was cubic, so highest degree was 3. That means I have those 3 answers. And again, sometimes just one of your answers could be the same number. Okay, let's go over here. Now, the only thing I'm going to do here is we're not putting them in simplified radical form because that's something we learn next week. Okay, let's go ahead and solve for this. Okay, so again, it has to be equal to 0. So we got to move the 60 over. I have 2x squared minus 54 equals 0. Okay, well, I see a GCF of 2. I'm going to go ahead and factor that out. So I have x squared minus 17 equals 0. Okay. Now, with this one here, a little bit of it is going to go into the next unit. We haven't learned those techniques right now. So again, I'm going to show you 2 equals 0. I have x squared minus 17 equals 0. This one can't go. What's going to happen here is you add the 17 over. You have x squared equals 17. To get the x squared by itself, you have to take that square root, because that's the opposite of squaring something. So you get plus or minus square root of 17. So just seeing a little bit there with that one. Okay. And then this one here, x squared plus 4 is equal to 0. This one doesn't actually, there is no solution to this one, and I'll show you why. So there's no solution. Okay. The reason why, if you don't have a b value with this one, okay, so there's no b value, you can just move the number over. You cannot take the square root of a negative number, so that is just no solution. Okay. One I will show you though, just another quick example. Let's say I had x squared minus 9 equals 0. Okay. So with this one here, this is that difference of squares we talked about. So this is x plus 3, x minus 3. Talked about that in another video. So then x plus 3 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0. X is equal to -3 and x is equal to a +3. So you have those two numbers there. Again, if there's no b value, and we'll get into this next week, okay, then you can move that over, but we're not going to do anything with that right now. Okay, so just make sure that you solve by factoring and that zero product property. Okay, so that is it on solving. If you have any questions, please let me know.